the gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. Look, this is sort of the derivative of the previous amendment. The previous amendment was to speed up and expedite claims. This one is actually now to sort of crawl through, and if you geek out sort of like I do on how the artificial intelligence crawls through data stacks and can identify outliers or patterns, this one actually is sort of to utilize that same sort of data to streamline oversight, to reduce fraud, to basically identify where you have areas that saying, hey, this doesn't look right. Why is there a difference between different parts of the VA or different parts of the country? And so this is actually also, the amendment is specifically sort of focused on the financial management, where one is moving claims and helping veterans be able to see what their benefits are and moving it faster. This one is actually to sort of look at the books, because we have to have a moment of honesty. If you basically take the number of veterans that use the VA and divide it by the spending, you're somewhere around $38,000 per veteran that uses the facilities. That is an outlier in any category of healthcare. Could this help us understand what we're doing well, but also where there's outliers? And in some ways, this was a way of sort of helping me deal with, I was uncomfortable with the cost per delivery, but I couldn't identify what was wrong. This should help GAO and other experts sort of identify simply, hey, the VA is doing this great, but we have an issue here, and I'm hoping this technology brings that to the surface. And with that, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim time in opposition, although I am not opposed to the amendment.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, this amendment is non-controversial. I am not opposed to it. It supports artificial intelligence to assist the VA with its audits and financial management systems. It's an increase-decrease amendment, and we do not oppose it. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, and to the members here, I appreciate the kind words. Look, we're sort of in the edge of a revolution of being able to understand these massive data sets. If we do this well, maybe the constant conversation we have here between the left and the right of government, the spending, there's not enough money, issues, are we about to sort of step up and start to embrace the technology that may make what we do, what we're responsible for, better, faster, cheaper, and maybe in some ways, because of that efficiency, more moral? And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I demand a roll call vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise as the designee of the gentlewoman from Connecticut, and I move to strike the last word.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. And I yield to the gentlewoman from Massachusetts, the distinguished minority whip, Ms. Clark.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentlelady for yielding. This month marks 2 years since extreme MAGA Republicans dismantled Roe v. Wade, subjecting American women to reproductive oppression not seen for half a century. But for the other side of the aisle, it's still not enough. In Texas, they unleashed bounty hunters on pregnant women. In Ohio, they prosecuted a woman for having a miscarriage. In Alabama, they shut down fertility treatments. And today, in the United States Capitol, they've chosen their next target, our veterans. Today, they're telling 2 million women veterans that if they need an abortion to save their life, the VA should turn them away. That MAGA ideology matters more than our veterans' health, their freedom, even their survival. There was a time in this chamber when we would unite behind our country's flag and the patriots who serve under it. But in this version of the Republican Party, extremism has displaced patriotism. They are so consumed by fanaticism that they would hijack our VA budget and threaten the very women who defended their freedom to speak in this chamber. My colleagues should be ashamed to play a part in this attack on our nation's heroes. What a craven abandonment of oath and country. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida yields. It is now in order to consider Amendment number 45, printed in Part B of House Report 118-535. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I rise as the designee of the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Self, and I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 45, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-535, offered by Mr. Stubbe of Florida.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1269, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stubbe, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to urge support for Congressman Self's amendment, which will prohibit the funds from this bill to be used to give critical skills incentive, or CSI, bonuses to senior executives at the VA Central Office. Recently, the VA Office of Investigator General released a report that found that the VHA and the VBA improperly awarded over $10 million of these bonuses to senior bureaucrats in the VA Central Office. What's worse is that this was no technical glitch or error. This was a strategic move by the Undersecretaries of Health and Benefits to line the pockets of DC bureaucrats. Just this week, we held a hearing in the House Veterans Affairs Committee where Secretary McDonough tried to explain their actions. However, their actions are inexcusable. Meanwhile, this is a slap in the face to rank-and-file VA employees, such as the nurse making sure a veteran has a quality visit to a VA hospital, or the caseworker assisting a veteran with a claim, who will work their tails off day in and day out to serve our heroes. I served in the U.S. military, and one of the guiding principles is that leaders eat last. Clearly, in this instance, the bureaucrats at the VA ate first. This is why I've sponsored this amendment, which would prohibit the VA from using these bonuses to pad the pockets of their bureaucratic friends, and I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman wants to yield back? The gentleman wants to yield back or intends to reserve?
I'll reserve.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim time in opposition to the gentleman's amendment.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, let me first just make clear, because I believe the gentleman from Florida misspoke, because this amendment prohibits incentive bonus payments to anyone in the senior executive service in the entire VA, not just the central office. So let's be clear what this amendment does. It goes much further than the gentleman described. And the VA has acknowledged that they made a mistake in issuing bonus payments to certain employees in the VA central office, and they've taken steps to address this error and recoup these funds. In fact, 92% of these funds have already been recouped, and the remaining will likely be recovered soon. This issue is on its way to being resolved. It is an administrative mistake, and this amendment is completely unnecessary and takes a sledgehammer where a chisel would be more appropriate. This amendment would go further by disincentivizing dedicated public servants from serving the VA by preventing any merit-based bonuses, not just for the central office, as the gentleman from Florida described. We should be investing in ways to attract talent to the VA, and this amendment takes us backwards. Humans make mistakes. I mean, that's the reality, and I think all of us would acknowledge that we've made some mistakes in our lives, sometimes big ones. But we shouldn't be cutting off our nose to spite our faces by taking away merit-based bonuses for the entire senior executive service at the VA going forward. I mean, really? How are we already have a recruitment and retention problem, and we have trouble attracting people to top quality talent to devote their lives to public service and their careers to public service. Do we think that taking away any opportunity for a merit-based bonus is going to improve that situation? This is like outrageous overkill. When the VA has already addressed this And this is an irresponsible amendment that I urge members to oppose because we would be hurting our own ability to retain and recruit top quality talent at the VA. People make mistakes. This is administratively being taken care of, and we need to just make sure that we can move on and not seek out a problem and face a solution in search of a problem. And I reserve my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. VA money and the money that is appropriated by this body for taxpayers should go to the service of our veterans and not to millions of dollars in bonuses for senior bureaucrats. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
I think if you took a look at the expenditures made by many members of Congress in our offices, you would see that we use responsibly some of our funding to provide bonuses for the service of our own employees. That happens all across the federal government, just like it does across the private sector, only a lot less significantly, understandably, because public service is a noble profession, one that people choose to engage in, but we want to make sure that we attract top talent to public service, and eliminating the ability for the entire VA to provide that kind of merit-based bonus is irresponsible, and it will make it less likely that we have the top quality talent willing to make the sacrifice to come and serve our veterans at the VA. Why would we do that? That makes no sense. This was an error. It's being corrected. It's almost completely corrected, and unfortunately, the gentleman from Florida and the sponsor of this amendment are going way too far and hurting our ability to make sure that we can take care of our veterans with the top talent that they deserve. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields. The question on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Florida. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I demand a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Florida will be postponed. It is now in order to consider amendment number 46, printed in Part B of House Report 118-535. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 46, printed in Part B of House Report number 118-535, offered by Mr. Stubbe of Florida.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1269, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stubbe, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of my amendment that would prohibit the Department of Veterans Affairs from using any funds under this bill to process medical claims for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. In December of last year, I led a letter to the VA along with 23 other Republican members after receiving reports that the VA had contracted with ICE to process medical claims for illegal aliens in ICE custody. Considering the record numbers of illegal aliens streaming across our border thanks to the Biden administration's reckless policies, we were concerned that the VA personnel were being taken away from their mission to serve our veterans. I am pleased that the underlying bill prohibits the VA from providing benefits directly to illegal aliens. However, my amendment is still necessary to ensure that the VA resources are focused solely on veterans, since the current interagency arrangement allows the VA to provide this service to ICE. The VA exists to serve American veterans who risk their lives to protect our great country. For far too long, the VA has fallen short in its mission, and I quote, to fulfill President Lincoln's promise to care for him who shall have borne the battle and for his widow and his orphan by serving and honoring the men and women who are Americans' veterans. Unfortunately, veterans continue to experience unacceptable wait times in receiving medical care and disability benefits. In particular, the VA's disability claim backlog has been a source of significant frustration in the veteran community. After several years under the Trump administration in which the VA disability claims backlog was consistently under 100,000 claims, the backlog has nearly tripled under the Biden administration to 278,000 as of last week. This is an abject failure, and our veterans deserve better from the VA. Despite the long-standing issues with its claims backlog and customer service issues, VA personnel are being tasked with serving claims for government-funded health care for illegal immigrants, not veterans. VA resources should be used solely for veterans and their survivors. Congress appropriates funds to the VA to provide services to our veterans, not illegal immigrants. Our veterans serve our country, and it is high time that our government starts serving them. I reserve the balance of my time.
From Florida reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to claim time in opposition to the gentleman's amendment.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The VA provides a purely administrative function for Immigration and Customs Enforcement to process medical claims. Moreover, ICE pays for these services, not the VA. There are no funds in this bill to prohibit being spent. ICE pays VA to process their medical claims. This is an amendment that doesn't even apply to funding in our bill. This amendment is misplaced, and it conflates the services that the VA actually provides with the larger issue of immigration because, our friends on the other side of the aisle never miss an opportunity to bash immigrants who are simply trying to come to this country and make a better way of life for themselves and their families. And it's once again injecting unnecessary policy debates into a historically bipartisan bill. Another poison pill culture war rider. Whatever your position is on immigration, this amendment does not belong in the Milcon VA bill and does nothing to move us forward towards better health care and services for our veterans. The reality is that if the gentleman's amendment passes, then ICE would have to stand up an entirely separate process that would have to be set up to process these claims, because the claims have to get processed, if VA didn't manage it for them. That would be incredibly expensive, fiscally irresponsible, and makes no sense. But again, we shouldn't miss an opportunity to bash veterans. I urge my colleagues to oppose the amendment, particularly because this amendment purports to prohibit funds from being spent that you can't spend because they're not in this bill. I reserve my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
The gentlelady just admitted that the VA is administratively using resources to help illegal immigrants. I think that the VA's mission, being a veteran myself, should be to support veterans, not illegal immigrants. And any resources that we have, having in my first Congress, I served on the VA committee, and you heard time and time again, despite adding more and more money to the VA because they can't deal with the backlogs, they need more funds to do that, then why are we using resources that are at the VA to assist illegal immigrants in the processing at ICE? I think that's completely unconscionable, not only as a veteran, but somebody that served this country. I think if the people in my district certainly knew that money that was appropriated to the VA, that those people are using those resources to help illegal immigrants through ICE, would be completely objectionable to everybody in my district. And I would ask all of the members of this body to support this great amendment, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps the gentleman has selective hearing because there are no funds being spent by the VA to process these claims because ICE, from their budget, pays the VA to process the claims. There are no resources that are expended by the VA because the funding comes from ICE's budget. So this amendment is inapplicable to our bill and is just a culture war opportunity to bash immigrants. It's irresponsible, and it's also fiscally irresponsible because the claims from ICE have to get processed, and they would have to stand up an entirely separate claims processing system in order to get those claims processed. This saves money and does not take any funding away from processing claims for our veterans. With that, I yield back the remaining balance of my time in opposition to the amendment.
The gentlewoman yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Florida. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
Mr. Chair, I move that the committee now rise.
The question is on the motion that the committee rise. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee on the Whole House on the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 8580, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration H.R. 8580 and has come to no resolution thereon. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess for a period less than 15 minutes.